Chapter 5:11. Yes. The man responded, then turned the car and ran a green light. The pedestrians on the side of the road were scared and fled. The traffic policeman whistled hard, furious. Li Jinan was about to follow, but the traffic policeman suddenly rushed up, waved at him, and whistled a warning. Turning the steering wheel, Li Jinan slammed on the brake. The car in front of him had already driven far away. Tang Zhenghao turned around and even waved at him with a smug smile. F***ck. Li Jinan slammed the steering wheel, almost going crazy. Ignoring the traffic policeman's beating on the window, Li Jinan picked up the phone and called Li Xicheng. Brother, sister-in-law has been kidnapped. Come back. After telling the location and the request, Li Jinan was asked to get out of the car by the traffic policeman. Li Xicheng went downstairs, ignoring Ming's yelling. After driving out of the car, he drove the car to the highest speed and went straight to the abandoned warehouse in the eastern suburbs. When he arrived, it was already half dark. And just at the door of the warehouse, a man was standing, smoking a cigarette. Seeing Li Xicheng's car coming, he whistled. It's really Li Xicheng. Even the car he drives is different. Where is she? What's the hurry? Isn't she inside? Don't worry, your wife and children are still fine. Come on, be a good boy and come in with me. The man waved at Li Xicheng, whistled, and stepped back with a playful look. It looked like he was flirting with a little puppy. Li Xicheng clenched his fists, and his face, which was already cold and indifferent, became even more tense. Walking in, the man laughed and said, "Good dog, come on, I'll give you a meat bone." As he spoke, he actually threw a lunchbox over. A pig bone rolled out with rice grains on it. Li Xicheng's cold eyes glanced at him. The man suddenly felt a chill, but he looked even more arrogant. What the F***ck are you staring at? What about her? Li Xicheng repeated. His voice was so cold that it sounded like ice was falling off. Oh my, such a bad temper. If I didn't know better, I would think I was in your office. Tang Zhenghao's voice came out, looking slightly fat. Looking at Li Xicheng, he sneered, "What? Are you used to being a big boss? Can't stand being treated like a puppy all of a sudden?" Just behind Tang Zhenghao, Tang Menjing also walked out. She was wearing a tight black leather outfit, and her hair was permed into sexy big wavy curls. Her face was exquisitely made up, which made her already beautiful and coquettish facial features even more exquisite and moving. Especially her lips, which were bright red and dazzling. Brother Xicheng, you're finally here. I've missed you so much. Tang Menjing smiled. Although she said so, there was no longer any infatuation on her face. All that was left was indifference. You are here for me, aren't you? Li Xicheng looked at her, did not speak, and narrowed his eyes. In that pair of eyes that were as deep as an ancient well, the dangerous and threatening atmosphere was overflowing. Obviously, he was angry. Tang Menjing smiled and clapped her hands. Just inside the room, there came the sound of stumbling footsteps. Chapter 5:12. What do you want to do? Li Xicheng's voice was unexpectedly calm. Looking at them indifferently, Li Xicheng clenched his fists. However, as soon as he said that, he heard a strong sound behind him. Li Xicheng was instantly alerted and dodged sideways. The next moment, he had already grabbed the hand of the attacker and twisted it. The attacker screamed and then took the steel pipe away. Clap, clap, clap. Tang Zhenghao clapped and said with a smile, "Nice move." Tang Menjing suddenly turned around and picked up a steel pipe. Patting it in her palm, she chuckled and pointed it at Su Qianxi's belly. Li Xicheng was scared and roared, "Don't you dare!" Swoosh! Another sound came from behind him. This time, Li Xicheng did not have time to dodge. His hand holding the steel pipe was hit hard. Feeling the pain, Li Xicheng's hand moved out of inertia, and the steel pipe fell to the ground. Ah! No! Su Qianxi's heart trembled fiercely. Seeing his hand instantly red and swollen and blue, she burst into tears and screamed. Li Xiqing subconsciously wanted to fight back, but he heard Tang Menjing's gentle voice. Brother Xiqing, don't blame me for not giving you a chance. As long as you avoid it, or you fight back, I will take the blame on her. Then, she laughed, as sweet as a bell, but at this moment, it was the most vicious voice. She said, say, if I hit with this stick. Then, she pointed the steel pipe at Su Qianxi's belly, smiling. Su Qianxi looked at the steel pipe and closed her legs, shaking terribly. Don't you dare. Li Xiqing's face turned red and he roared. Tang Menjing raised an eyebrow. I even dare to kill my own son, let alone someone else's son. What a pity. I heard that they are twins. Both of them are very healthy. If this stick were to hit them. Ah! Li Xiqing's leg was hit hard, and the pain suddenly spread all over his body. He screamed unconsciously and knelt on the ground. Go, go. She burst into tears. Li Xiqing. The voice was sharp and desperate. Hearing it, Li Xiqing's heart suddenly trembled and ached. Don't cry. I'm fine, ugh. Before he could finish his words, his back was struck once more. Ah! She struggled hard, but the person behind her was so strong that no matter how hard she struggled, he would not let her go. Seeing more and more blood on his body, she was overwhelmed with despair and fear. Don't hit him, don't. The perpetrator laughed coldly and swung the steel pipe down with great force, ruthlessly swinging it at his legs, followed by his hands, back, and waist. Not a single part of his body was spared. Li Xiqing bore it silently and looked in her direction. All that was left in his ears was the whooshing sound of the steel pipes cutting through the air, the muffled sound of them landing on his body, and the occasional sound of bones being broken. Her voice was getting farther and farther away, and her figure was becoming more and more blurred. Li Xiqing. Her voice seemed to reach his ears. Li Xiqing struggled to raise his hand, trying to smile, but a gust of air rushed up from somewhere in his body and went straight to his throat. Li Xiqing could not help coughing violently and vomited a mouthful of sticky blood. Chapter 5:13. When he came out of the forum, it was already dark. Rong Haiyue looked at the time. It was already past 7 in the evening. He had an appointment with Li Xiqing for dinner at 8, and there were still 5 minutes left. Rong Xian followed behind Rong Haiyue and called, Rong Haiyue. Yes? Rong Haiyue responded quietly. His attitude toward her was very different from before. In the past month, Rong Xian and he had only met a few times at home. When they saw each other, they were not even in the mood to greet each other, let alone quarrel. To be honest, Rong Haiyue thought that she would definitely ask for a divorce. However, unexpectedly, she did not. When he left home this morning, he did not know what was wrong with Rong Xian. She actually asked to come to Kingstown with him. Rong Haiyue was surprised, but he did not refuse. He asked someone to book an extra ticket, and the two got on the plane to Kingstown together. When they arrived in Kingstown, it was already noon. They had been attending the forum until now. Now, she was probably here to complain. Rong Haiyue's heart was cold, but he did not speak first. A pair of sharp eagle eyes looked at her, raised his eyebrows, and waited for her to speak first. You have an appointment with Li Xiqing? Yes. This time you came to Kingstown to meet them? Of course, she was referring to Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi. Rong Haiyue put his hand in his coat pocket and nodded without hesitation. Yes. Take me with you. Rong Xian looked at him. I want to see her. You need to ask Su Qianxi about this. I will call them. Rong Haiyue's cell phone was already ready. At this time, he directly clicked on the screen and dialed the number. However, Su Qianxi's cell phone could not be reached, and Li Xiqing's cell phone was also not picked up. Suddenly, Rong Haiyue seemed to see a familiar shadow. It was a slender figure, wearing a pink cap, with long curly hair, wearing a loose long coat and a pair of black high heels. She lowered her head and wore a mask as she went into the darkness. That was Anna. However, shouldn't she be in London at this time? Why was he in Kingstown? Rong Haiyue followed her in confusion. From a distance, he saw Rong Anna walking on the road quickly. He picked up the phone and dialed her number. The slender figure was a little far away from him. Rong Haiyue did not hear the ringtone, but the ringtone sounded. The girl in front of him also picked up the phone. Hello, Dad? Anna, where are you? Rong Anna was obviously a little surprised and said, I'm in London, on tour with Xiao. I'll be back in a few days. Oh. I see. Well, what's the matter, Dad? The cute voice seemed to be no different from the usual Rong Anna. Rong Haiyue looked at the figure in front of him, was silent for a moment, and said, It's okay. Come back early. Without you at home, I don't even have someone to talk to. Rong Xian heard Rong Haiyue's words and tightened her grip on her bag. Rong Haiyue did not notice it. He only heard Rong Anna giggling and said, Soon, don't miss me too much, Muah. Okay, bye. Chapter 5:14. There was no doubt that this person was Rong Anna. Rong Haiyue looked at the figure, and a bit of disappointment flashed in his sharp eagle eyes. At the same time, Rong Haiyue couldn't help but think of what Li Xiqing had said some time ago. Rong Anna and Bo Xiao were likely to be the people who attacked Su Qianxi that day. Because they were afraid that Su Qianxi would recognize them, they chose to kill her in the capital. Now, were they coming to retaliate against Su Qianxi again? Rong Anna hung up the phone, walked to a black car, opened the door, and got in. The car quickly started and drove toward the highway not far away. Rong Haiyue strode up and stopped a taxi. Follow the black car in front. Rong Xian quickly followed, and Rong Haiyue remembered that Rong Xian was still next to him. Seeing the obvious astonishment in Rong Haiyue's eyes, Rong Xian looked calm and sat in the car. The taxi followed the black car, and at Rong Haiyue's request, it always kept a distance from them. Later, the route of the black car became more and more deviated, and Rong Haiyue vigilantly asked the driver to slow down so as not to be discovered. After about 5 or 6 minutes, Rong Haiyue saw the black car again. After paying the fare and getting out of the car, Rong Haiyue found that this was a suburb. Not far from the car was an abandoned building. All kinds of waste machinery were piled up together, some high. The smell of gasoline and machinery mixed together, a bit unpleasant. Looking into the distance, Rong Haiyue saw a faint light inside. Rong Xian had never encountered such a scene. Seeing Rong Haiyue's cautious look, she couldn't help but ask, What are you doing? Rong Haiyue's sharp eagle eyes flashed, and he gave the phone to Rong Xian. If Li Xiqing calls, you tell him that I am busy and may not be able to arrive. Then, don't go in. It is likely to be a criminal gang. Our adopted daughter, Rong Anna, and Bo Xiao are likely to be one of them. Rong Xian was shocked, covering her mouth and looking at him. Call the police first. Don't come in if there is nothing. I will go in and see. Rong Xian nodded, standing outside and said, Okay. Rong Haiyue turned and was about to go in when Rong Xian stopped him. Rong Haiyue. Yes? Rong Haiyue turned around and asked, What's wrong? Rong Xian looked at him for a long time before saying in a low voice, Be careful. Hearing this, Rong Haiyue was slightly stunned. Immediately, the heartstrings in his heart, which had calmed down for more than a month, were suddenly plucked again, shaking fiercely for a long time. Rong Xian took a small step back. Her expression could not be seen in the darkness. She whispered, Are you still not going? Rong Haiyue chuckled, nodded, and walked inside. Rong Xian's heart was pounding. She didn't seem to hate him that much anymore. Ever since that slap, ever since he almost killed her, Rong Xian's lips curled into a self-deprecating smile. In the darkness, she muttered to herself, Rong Xian, you're so cheap. Su Qianxi was firmly imprisoned, crying so hard that her throat was almost split open, but no one moved or paid any attention. On the contrary, because of her crying, those people laughed even more proudly. Chapter 5:15. No more fighting, finally no more fighting. She cried so hard that she felt weak. Looking at Li Xiqing lying in a pool of blood, she felt like she had been cut into pieces. Why? Why did she do that to him? It was all because of her that Li Xiqing became like this. That was Li Xiqing. In her previous lifetime, he had made a name for himself in the business world. How many people wanted to deal with him? How many people wanted to defeat him? However, at that time, Li Xiqing was so strong that he had no weaknesses. If it were not for her, thinking of this, Su Qianxi could not stop her tears. I'm sorry, Li Xiqing was now in a semi-conscious state. He vaguely heard Su Qianxi's apology. He looked up and wanted to say something, but he coughed and spat out blood again. Tang Menjing slowly walked over, her every step elegant. Slowly, she squatted in front of Li Xiqing, her eyes full of pity and face full of sadness. However, she had a crazy laugh. What's so good about this woman? Is she worth it? Li Xiqing, is it painful to be beaten like this? It must be very painful, haha. As long as you beg me, I can save you now. Li Xiqing heard that and chuckled, his voice weak. Beg you? Yes, I can make you recover and live a healthy life. When you are well, you can divorce that bitch Su Qianxi and ask her to abort the child. If you like children, I can give birth to them for you. I have given birth to them before. My children will definitely be 100 times better than Su Qianxi's children. Tang Menjing grabbed his hair, lifted his head, and said with a smile, to be honest, I also like children. We can have many, okay? Li Xiqing closed his eyes and laughed even louder. Tang Menjing let go of him, arched an eyebrow, and whistled. It seems that you failed. Brother Xiqing, what's wrong with me? You used to say that I am beautiful and sensible. Whoever marries me will be very happy. But why don't you want to be a happy man? You have to push me away. Sad, really sad. Now, you are not only hurting me, but also your wife, your children, and your twins. Hee hee. Hee hee hee. Tang Menjing smiled and walked up to Su Qianxi. Gently touching Su Qianxi's face, she said, your skin is so good. 21, right? Her face is really full of collagen, young and beautiful. Don't touch her. Li Xiqing said with difficulty. He coughed up another mouthful of blood and blacked out. Tang Menjing immediately withdrew her hand, looking scared. I won't touch her. I don't dare. Ha ha ha. With that, he strode to the back and shouted, hey, time to work. As soon as Tang Menjing said that, two men walked out of the room with two big bottles in their hands. Looking at Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi, they sneered and opened the lids. Chapter 5:16. The strong smell of gasoline spread throughout the warehouse. Several men poured 4 barrels of gasoline around the abandoned warehouse. When Rong Anna and Bo Xiao went in, they saw Li Xiqing lying in a pool of blood. Embarrassed and bloody. Li Xiqing's arrogance was nowhere to be seen. Seeing this, Rong Anna frowned and looked at Su Qianxi. Su Qianxi's emotions had collapsed, and there was only Li Xiqing in her eyes. Tang Menjing took out a lighter and played with it on her fingers, looking at the expression on Li Xiqing's face expectantly. Sure enough, there was finally a trace of emotion on Li Xiqing's face. He looked up at her and reached out to her. Tang Menjing raised her eyebrows with satisfaction, chuckled, and said, You want to talk to me? What do you want to say? Go ahead. Stepping on high heels, she went forward and squatted down to listen. Let her go. Li Xiqing's voice was weak but clear, with a bit of pleading. She and the child are innocent. If you have any hatred, take it out on me. Don't touch her. Seeing Li Xiqing like this, Tang Zhenghao was very proud. He laughed out loud and said, Li Xiqing, you deserve this. It's a pity that I did not bring Li Xiao here. Otherwise, it would be wonderful. I will let you die with your father. Wow, do you think Li Sun will cry? Ha ha ha. However, if I can kill you, it will be enough for the Li family. Next, it will be Li Xiao, Li Jinnan, Li Beixing, Li Sun, and that bitch Qin Shuhua. Speaking of Qin Shuhua, the anger in Tang Zhenghao's heart overflowed. He strode to Li Xiqing's side and kicked him hard. Li Xiqing groaned. Tang Zhenghao kicked him several times in a row, making Li Xiqing convulse in pain. At the same time, Rong Haiyue carefully walked forward. Although he was a little far away, he soon heard the hysterical shouting inside. No, I beg you. Don't hit me. If you keep hitting me, I will die. I will really die. Ah, Rong Haiyue was shocked. That was Su Qianxi's voice. Hearing Su Qianxi's cry, Tang Zhenghao felt comfortable. He pulled Li Xiqing's hair up and made him look at Su Qianxi, smiling wickedly. Comfortable? Back then, when your mother killed my son, it must have been this comfortable. Then, Tang Zhenghao grabbed Li Xiqing's head and slammed it against the ground, shouting, Why? CK you bitch. Why did my son fall down the mountain with you? You didn't die, but my son died? Why? Why? Li Xiqing's head hit the ground, making a loud noise. Su Qianxi felt that her heart was also bleeding. Watching him being tortured was more painful than torturing herself. She closed her eyes, and tears fell silently. Despair, despair, no one came to save them, no one. Could it be that they could only wait for death? However, he suddenly heard Tang Zhenghao's scream. The voice came very suddenly, and was completely out of place in the overwhelming situation just now. Then, Tang Menjing exclaimed, Dad. At the same time, Rong Anna also said, Dad? Chapter 5:17. Just. Rong Haiyue? How could he suddenly appear? Su Qianxi felt like she was dreaming. Looking at him, she quickly screamed, Mr. Rong, go. Dangerous, too dangerous. This time, it was not like last time when Mrs. Tang had a few gangsters. This time, it was a drug gang, and they had more than one gun. Rong Haiyue heard Su Qianxi's cry and turned his head, but it was because of this that he was attacked by Tang Zhenghao. Tang Zhenghao was middle-aged and fat. When he was young, he was also in the army, and his strength was definitely not small. At this moment, Rong Haiyue was pressed to the ground, and his fat hand grabbed his neck. He picked up the steel pipe next to him and was about to swing it at Rong Haiyue. Don't touch my father. Rong Anna shouted, but Tang Zhenghao did not stop. He directly swung his thick arm straight at Rong Haiyue's head. Rong Haiyue was a major general after all. At this moment, seeing this, he raised his knee and wanted to push him away. However, Tang Zhenghao's weight was actually heavier than he thought. His neck was grabbed, and Rong Haiyue's face turned red. He bent his elbow and hit Tang Zhenghao's head. Tang Zhenghao was pushed up, and his movement was slightly off. With a strong push, Tang Zhenghao lifted the steel pipe in his hand again, ready to hit Rong Haiyue's head. Swoosh! The originally loud gunshot, under the silencer, became a subtle sound of breaking wind. Rong Haiyue clearly heard the sound of flesh being pierced. He was shocked and looked up, only to see Tang Zhenghao's eyes wide open and his body stiff. Then, Tang Zhenghao's body fell straight forward, steadily pressing on Rong Haiyue's body. The steel pipe that was originally held in his hand also fell to the ground in an instant, making a clattering sound. Blood flowed down Tang Zhenghao's neck to Rong Haiyue's body, with a warm and moist feeling, clearly into his clothes. Rong Haiyue was shocked. After pushing Tang Zhenghao away, he immediately looked in the direction of Rong Anna. Rong Anna did not move, but the man standing next to her, holding a pistol, his eyes cold and indifferent. He did not panic at all because he had killed someone. Obviously, he was not a newbie. Ah! Tang Menjing screamed, Dad! With this scream, Rong Haiyue seemed to wake up from a dream and pushed the body away. Tang Zhenghao's body lay on the ground, his eyes wide open, motionless. Tang Menjing hurried to Tang Zhenghao in her high heels, looking incredulous. Standing far away, Su Qianxi was tied up, but seeing this scene, she was paralyzed. Kill, murder? The gun was fired by Bo Xiao. He had killed Tang Zhenghao, Rong Anna also exclaimed and shouted in disbelief, "You are crazy. That's Tang Zhenghao. The goods are still with him. He's too annoying and naggy. He beat Li Xiqing like this when we were not here. Who's going to help us now? What an idiot. The goods are still with him?" Rong Haiyue immediately caught the point. He got up and was furious. "Anna." Rong Anna was shocked, and her first reaction was to respond, "Dad, what are you doing? Are you really selling drugs? Did you really go with Bo Xiao to do this?" For a moment, Rong Anna did not know how to explain. Suddenly, there was a subtle sound outside. It was the sound of a gun being loaded. Hearing this subtle sound, both Bo Xiao and Rong Anna's expressions changed. Who was outside? Chapter 5:18. Bo Xiao made up his mind and gestured to Rong Anna, and the people behind him immediately understood. One person went forward to check and suddenly stopped, turning around and shouting, "Police! So many police, run!" Both Bo Xiao and Rong Anna were shocked. For the first time, several people inside all rushed toward the back door. "Don't even think about leaving." Tang Menjing suddenly yelled, picked up the phone in her hand, lit it, and threw it at the place where the gasoline had been poured. Boom! The fire suddenly sprang up, without warning, unprepared. Scorching waves of air rushed over in an instant, bringing with them the smell of burning ruins and the smell of gasoline. Every place was covered in a layer of orange-red flames. The man finally let go of her. She was caught off guard and collapsed. The man looked at Tang Menjing angrily and shouted, "Crazy, you are crazy. We can't get out like this." Ha ha ha. Tang Menjing laughed almost crazily, holding Tang Zhenghao's body, with tears and cruel laughter. "Why do you want to go out? Don't even think about going out. Aren't you afraid of the police? With such a big fire, the police dare not come in. All of you, die together. Motherf asterisk cur, crazy." The man went up and directly hit Tang Menjing with a stick, hard on her body. Tang Menjing screamed. The man was still angry and kicked her in the back hard. "Go, don't hit her. Take her with you. She knows where the goods are." Bo Xiao shouted, but he took Rong Anna and rushed toward the back door. Seeing this, the man cursed, but immediately no longer hesitated. He directly pulled Tang Menjing up and ran toward the back door. "Rong Anna, stop!" Rong Haiyue roared. "Bo Xiao, where are you taking my daughter?" Rong Anna slightly paused, turned around, and saw Rong Haiyue's expression. Bo Xiao pulled her and roared, "Do you really think he is your father? His daughter is there. Who do you think you are? Come with me." Rong Haiyue heard this and his heart sank. How did they know? He clearly did not tell them about this, and he did not reveal anything when he returned home. When did Rong Anna know? When Rong Anna heard Bo Xiao's words, she was moved. She looked at Rong Haiyue and whispered quickly, "I'm sorry, Dad." "Anna." Rong Haiyue's voice was flustered and scared. "Anna." But Rong Anna no longer stayed and rushed straight to the back. "Mr. Rong, help!" Su Qianxi cried, her eyes full of begging. Her voice was hoarse and choked. "Please, save us, who? For a moment, the fire grew fiercer and fiercer, and crackling sounds of explosions could be heard everywhere. This was an abandoned electrical appliance factory. Abandoned machinery and industrial wreckage were the most dangerous. Surrounded by the fire, only the half-dead Li Xiqing, Su Qianxi, and Rong Haiyue were left. Rong Haiyue was disappointed with Rong Anna, but he quickly reacted. He walked toward Su Qianxi and untied her. Just at this moment, the sound of panicked footsteps came from outside. 5 or 6 people filed in. Seeing this scene, someone quickly gave orders. One of you stay behind, the rest go after the criminals. Chapter 5:19. However, she did not dare to touch him, did not dare. There was no place on Li Xiqing's body that was not stained with blood. Just like that, he lay quietly on the ground, even his breathing was very weak. What to do, what to do? Su Qianxi burst into tears. Take him to the hospital, take him to the hospital, hurry up. Rong Haiyue wanted to, but there was nothing he could do. Don't move. The policeman warned, squatted down to check, and announced, there are many fractures on the body. Don't move. If the bones pierce the internal organs, it will not be fun. The fire was getting bigger and bigger, and there was the sound of explosions from time to time. The unpleasant smell of burning machinery kept coming. It's dangerous. Take her away first, Li Xiqing's voice was very weak. Take her out first, please. No, no, Su Qianxi cried. If we go together. No, I don't want you to die. The child can't live without a father. Please, save him, take him with you, I beg you. Su Qianxi said and even wanted to kneel and kowtow to them. Rong Haiyue quickly held her and forced her to calm down with a pair of sharp eagle eyes. He said word by word, listen, the situation is a bit dangerous now. The fire is too big. If we don't go out now, we won't be able to. Now, I will take you out first. Later, I will carry Li Xiqing out with this policeman, and I promise I will give you a Li Xiqing alive, okay? Really? Su Qianxi wiped her tears and looked at Li Xiqing. Li Xiqing nodded at her. Be good and protect the child first. I will go out later. But, no buts. Rong Haiyue almost roared. If you want him to live, you must get out now. Get out. Only when you get out safely can we have nothing to worry about. Su Qianxi stopped crying and nodded dumbly. However, her eyes still couldn't help looking in the direction of Li Xiqing. Li Xiqing also looked up at her. His usually cold, sharp, and dark eyes were now reflecting the fire. The stars at the bottom of his eyes seemed to have gathered thousands of stars, which was very beautiful. Su Qianxi. His voice was weak. Hearing this, Su Qianxi almost broke down and burst into tears, but she did not dare to. Gritting her teeth, she looked at him. He looked at her, his eyes full of tenderness. He said, I love you, forever. His heart felt as if something was running away quickly, and he was losing it quickly. So empty, the fire was very big, and there was a large area of fallen beams and ruins in the surroundings. There was almost no way out. Tang Zhenghao was very good at choosing a place. The place where they were just now was the central area of the abandoned factory. They were dozens of meters away from the place where there was no fire. Thick black smoke rushed up, and Su Qianxi almost fainted. She forcefully covered her mouth and nose, but the black smoke was still pervasive, causing her vision to turn black. Rong Haiyue gritted his teeth and whispered, hold your breath. Rong Xian stood at the door for a long time, and suddenly there was a car coming from behind. Police car. Several policemen came to her side, quietly asked her a few words, and then left one to look at her. Then they all quietly approached the abandoned factory. Chapter 5:20. Rong Xian's mind was buzzing, looking at the place shrouded in fire. He was still inside, they were still inside. Her daughter, her husband, Rong Xian's breathing became more and more rapid, and she ran inside. The policewoman who stayed to watch her pulled her and said, don't go in. Our people went in, and the people inside will be fine. Yes, with the police, it would be fine. Rong Xian waited for a long time. After what seemed like a few centuries, someone finally walked out from inside. A tall figure, holding a pregnant woman. The pregnant woman's belly was very eye-catching. It seemed that she had fainted. Rong Xian did not care who the pregnant woman was. When she saw the tall figure, she knew it was him. He came out. Rong Xian breathed a sigh of relief and ran forward. Rong Haiyue was exhausted. Seeing Rong Xian, he put her in her arms and said, "Call an ambulance." She fainted. "Child, don't let anything happen to the child." Then he was about to get up and go inside again. Rong Xian was shocked and asked, "Where are you going?" "Li Xiqing is still inside. I must save him." Rong Haiyue finished and had already taken a step. "Such a big fire!" Rong Xian shouted, and there was a bit of fear in her voice. "It's too dangerous." Rong Haiyue stopped and turned around to look at her. She was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that he would die? Thinking of this, Rong Haiyue suddenly smiled, but in a moment, he turned and ran inside. While running, he said happily, "I will come out alive to see you." When Rong Xian heard this, there was an unknown place in the bottom of her heart, quietly scratched, and an unknown fire slowly rose, burned. The policewoman also ran in, and the two figures, one after the other, disappeared in the fire. Rong Xian immediately called an ambulance, but when she was asked for the address, she was speechless for a while. How did she know where it was? She was not familiar with Kingstown at all. Eastern Suburbs, number 8 abandoned factory. A faint voice sounded in her arms, and she said with half-opened eyes. Rong Xian immediately repeated the address, and then called the fire department. In the end, he helped her up and gently patted her face. "Are you okay? Drink some water first." Opening the bottle of mineral water she had drunk, Rong Xian fed it to her mouth. Su Qianxi took 2 sips, but her tears soon fell again. Rong Haiyue went to save him. "Don't worry, he will be fine," Rong Xian said. Although she said so, Rong Xian herself was not sure. The fire was so big that even the sky was red. The black ruins flew into the sky and then disappeared without a trace. A Porsche sports car drove over, and Su Qianxi and Rong Xian looked back at the same time. When Li Jinan saw Rong Xian, he was stunned. "Sister-in-law?" Su Qianxi saw Li Jinan's face, which was quite similar to Li Xiqing's. As if grasping a life-saving straw, she reached out to him and called, "Uncle." Li Jinan immediately came over and supported her. "How is it? Where's my brother?" Chapter 521. "Yes." Li Jinan's tone was firm. "Of course, he can. He is Li Xiqing. If he does not come out, the world will be in chaos. He will not dare not to come out." Yes, he was Li Xiqing, and he would not die. He did not dare to die. He had a great responsibility. He was carrying the entire Li group on his shoulders, as well as her and the children, their home. Su Qianxi's heart, because of this sentence of Li Jinan, slightly calmed down. Yes, how could he die? How could he dare to die? No way, no way, I'll go inside. I'll go inside to find him. Boom. Li Jinan's words, only 3 words, were stopped by a strong explosion and swallowed back into his mouth. Fire, from all the exits of the Low factory, burst out, carrying a scorching heat wave, like a burst balloon. In a moment, it turned into a raging fire, straight to the sky. Dyed the clouds red, dyed the sky red, high flames, jumping in the sky, forming a strange big smile, revealing hideous fangs, as if it was proud, as if it was showing off. "Look, I swallowed the man you love most." The debris of the wall, the industrial wreckage, suddenly splashed out, hitting their bodies and faces. It was not heavy, not big, not painful. But it pierced the hearts of the 3 of them in an instant. Li Jinan stared, looking at that place, unable to believe it. "Ah!" Su Qianxi screamed sharply, desperately climbing up in Rong Xian's arms, climbing in that direction. "Li Xiqing, Li Xiqing." Li Jinan quickly grabbed her and pulled her back. Rong Xian was also stunned. Hearing Su Qianxi scream, she did not know when her throat had been choked and painful. It was more painful than when Rong Haiyue pinched her. "Uncle, let me go, let me go." Su Qianxi's eyes had long been red and swollen. At this moment, looking at the place covered by the fire, in her heart, there was an unspeakable despair, like a cold tide, engulfing her and wrapping her. Unable to struggle free, unable to resist, Li Xicheng. Su Qianxi struggled and looked in that direction. Her crying voice had long been broken. Her throat had long been split open, and it was so dry that smoke was coming out. The pain went straight to her heart, burning, not giving her any room to breathe. So painful, so painful. He must be in more pain. Li Xicheng, Mr. Li, sister-in-law. Li Jinnan's voice was hoarse, but he was calmer than usual. He pulled her along and assured her, "He'll be fine. He'll be fine." Su Qianxi felt like her heart had been slapped. It hurt so much. What should she do? She seemed like she couldn't take it anymore. He felt a weight on his hand. Looking down, she had already passed out with her eyes closed. Rong Haiyue. Rong Xian looked at the sea of fire and rushed forward like crazy. The 8-centimeter pointed heels made Rong Xian fall down after running for 2 steps. Rong Haiyue, Rong Haiyue. Rong Xian's eyes were blurred by tears. She took off her high heels and ran around the back of the warehouse barefoot. It was very hot. The temperature on the ground was so high that Rong Xian could hardly stand. The raging fire had wrapped the entire building tightly. There was no place to go in, and there was no place to go out. No, that won't happen. There must be a way, there must be a place to go out. Chapter 522. Was it just because she lied to him more than 20 years ago, so he was going to lie to her again now? How could it be? How could it be? Rong Xian ran toward the back, her mind blank. The long cheongsam skirt had been rolled up by her. She threw away her coat so that she could run faster. But what about Rong Haiyue? Rong Haiyue? What about him? The abandoned factory was very big, really big. There were glass shards and rusty nails on the ground around them, and Rong Xian's feet were already bloody. Finally, in the back. On the other side of the abandoned factory, in the opposite direction from where they had just stood, there were 2 people lying. One of them was burning fiercely and was on the verge of death. He was wearing a police uniform, and his long hair had long been burnt to ashes. His body was twitching. But she was not dead yet. The other one, 4 or 5 meters away from the burning policewoman, was smoking slowly, but motionless. Rong Xian's tears fell immediately. She rushed up and turned the man over. Very hot, very hot. Rong Haiyue was burned to a bloody mess, but he was not dead, not dead. Found it, finally found it. Ah. Rong Xian hugged him and couldn't help crying. Rong Haiyue. Rong Haiyue vaguely seemed to hear someone calling him. The voice was so familiar to his bones. Wasn't this the voice of the woman he had been trying to please for more than 20 years? Was she crying? Was she calling his name? Rong Haiyue opened his eyes in a daze and could only see a shadow reflected in the fire. Rong Xian wiped her tears and said, "Wait, I will call someone." Then she carefully put him down, and then thought of something. She used all her strength to drag him out. After a full 10 or 20 meters away from the fire, she stopped. When she walked to the policewoman was still burning. However, she was no longer moving. There was blood flowing out of her head, and it was hideous. Dead, she was burned to death alive. "I'm sorry," Rong Xian said, and then ran back the way she came. Just then, the ambulance and the fire truck had arrived. Rong Xian was ecstatic and shouted, "Help! Someone was still alive, someone was still alive. Help!" Kingstown Morning News. Last night, an abandoned factory in the eastern suburbs of Kingstown caught fire and exploded. According to investigations, this was originally an electrical factory. After being abandoned, the old factory did not recycle some of the waste electrical appliances, which led to the tragedy. The firefighters worked overnight to put out the fire. It wasn't until 5:37 a.m. this morning that the fire was completely extinguished. A policewoman behind the factory was unfortunately killed by the explosion. Another person was seriously injured. No bodies were found at the scene of the explosion. Traces of DNA found at the scene include the former CEO of the Tang Group, now wanted for economic fraud, Mr. Tang, the current captain of the Kingstown Criminal Police Unit 3rd Team, Mr. Xia, and the most respected CEO of the Li Group. Seeing this news, Old Master Li's heart, which had been on tenterhooks all night, was finally confirmed. Lu Sa's breathing suddenly quickened. Seeing this, she hurried over and said, "Old Master, you." Chapter 523. Seeing this, Lu Sa knew that she could not hide it anymore. The tears that she had finally stopped came again. Captain Li slumped onto the sofa. His eyes were slightly red, and his breathing quickened. "Captain, don't be like this." "Mr. Li, where is Qianqian?" Captain Li's eyes were misty, and he took a deep breath. "Where is Qianqian?" "In the hospital." Mr. Li, and his wife are all there." Very good. "The whole family is hiding it from me." Lu Sa felt guilty. When she was about to explain, she heard Captain Li's weak voice. "Take me there. Qianqian will not be able to handle it." Lu Sa heard that and burst into tears. She said, "Damn it. The two of them are so close. They always hold each other when they go out, and Mr. Li is gone. Mrs. Li, how could she handle it?" As Lu Sa and Captain Li said, Su Qianxi could not handle it at all. Raising her hand and touching her bulging belly, Su Qianxi looked at the ceiling. Her eyes were empty, but her tears could not be stopped. Outside, the doctor was telling Qin Shuhua and Li Xiao in a loud voice, and Su Qianxi heard it clearly. "Be sure to rest well. The baby has symptoms of threatened abortion. It is already so big, and the possibility of twins being born prematurely is very high. It is best to rest well before giving birth. Be sure to control the mood of the pregnant woman." Control the mood of the pregnant woman. Hearing this, Su Qianxi suddenly felt very funny. However, he couldn't smile no matter what. Liar, Li Xiqing was a liar, a big liar. They had agreed that she would protect the baby and herself, and he would come out later. However, why did he not come out? Why not? How could he not come out? How dare he not come out? They had clearly agreed that he would spend every birthday with her in the future. But now, only one had passed. And the wedding he gave her, the honeymoon she wanted, the name he gave the baby, gone, everything was gone. Everything was engulfed in that huge fire. But, wasn't he Li Xiqing? Every time she was wronged, he would come to her side like a god. Every time she was in pain, he would appear. But what about the future? What about the future? What would she do without him? Li Xiqing was so excellent, so cold and arrogant. How could he lie? How could he die? Su Qianxi. "I love you forever," the last words he said to her, the last words. Her voice was low and soft, weak but sincere. He looked at her, his eyes as bright as the stars, so beautiful that they almost swallowed her. But he could no longer see it, no longer. She grabbed the blanket and gritted her teeth. She sobbed in a low voice, but did not let herself make a sound. The door of the ward was pushed open, making a slight sound. She immediately covered her head with the quilt, sniffed, and wiped her tears. Seeing this, Qin Shuhua felt even worse. She went up and sat by the bed. Holding Su Qianxi's hand, she said kindly, "If you want to cry, just cry it out." What was the use of crying? If she cried, would he come back? However, his heart was in so much pain that he was about to suffocate. What should she do? She didn't want to live anymore. She also wanted to follow him, and leave together. Chapter 524. Don't make wild guesses. 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 P.S. Empty chapter, author's speech, free. Chapter 525. Su Qianxi covered herself with the quilt, her shoulders shaking. Her heavy and hurried breathing revealed her current state without a doubt. Qin Shuhua covered her mouth, let go of Su Qianxi's hand, got up, and walked out of the ward. As soon as she saw Li Xiao, Qin Shuhua couldn't help crying. Li Xiao, what should we do? Our son, Li Xiao's eyes were also red, and he took out a tissue to wipe her tears. Qin Shuhua squatted down and cried her heart out. When Li Beixing came back, he was still wearing a military green uniform, but he still did not see Li Xiqing's body. At this moment, he was gasping, looking at his parents and brother waiting at the door of the ward. His face was full of disbelief. Walking forward, Li Beixing put his hand on Li Jinnan's shoulder. Li Jinnan took a deep breath, and his eyes were already red. Seeing Li Beixing coming over, he turned around and gave him a big hug. Li Beixing had never seen Li Jinnan like this. His heart was getting emptier and emptier. Looking into the room, he asked, "Sister-in-law is inside?" "Yes." Li Jinnan let go of him, his eyes slightly wet. "Since she came here, she has not made a sound," secretly crying. Li Beixing took a step back, looking at them. The tall and straight military green figure was indescribably majestic. He asked, "Have you seen his body?" "No." Li Jinnan covered his face in pain and sat on the stool. His voice was slightly choked, with a strong sense of self-blame. "How can I see a body after such a big explosion? How can there be no body? Isn't there a body?" Li Beixing did not want to believe that the high-spirited and decisive Li Xiqing was gone. "Are you kidding me? Any of them could die first, but Li Xiqing definitely had the last laugh. He was despicable and shameless. His endurance and perseverance were also extraordinary, and his vitality was even more tenacious. How could he be dead? If he is alive, I want to see him. If he is dead, I absolutely will not believe that he is dead without seeing his body." Li Beixing's voice was sonorous, looking at Li Jinnan. "Have you looked for him? Are you sure?" Li Jinnan did not speak, nor did he take his hand away. He just covered his face and sat quietly. Suddenly, someone in a police uniform came over. When he saw them, he asked, "Are you Li Xiqing's family?" "I'm the policeman in charge of this case. My surname is Li." Li Jinnan finally looked up at the police officer. "We found a relic that might belong to Mr. Li at the scene. Your family can confirm it." Bang! The door of the ward was suddenly pushed open with great force. After being slammed into the wall, it bounced back. A slender figure trotted over barefoot. Su Qianxi's face was pale, her eyes were red and swollen, and her hair was messy. She looked at what the police officer was holding. That thing was wrapped in a plastic bag. It was burnt black by the fire, and its shape had completely melted. However, from the blurry figure and the small diamond and gem that were burnt to ashes, it could be seen that it was originally a bird-like creature. Seeing it, Su Qianxi's lips trembled, and she grabbed it. He reached out to touch his neck, where he was wearing a noble and elegant swan. The lines were smooth, soft, and delicate. Looking at the gemstone and the diamond, these two should have been a pair. Chapter 526. This was what swans were like. They were loyal to love, to the other half, until death. Su Qianxi's eyes were blurred. She did not want to cry. Li Xiqing was not there. No one would care for her, and no one would help her wipe her tears. She looked down, and big tears fell on the soles of her feet. Su Qianxi found that she had forgotten to wear shoes again. It was really cold. Li Xiqing, help me bring my shoes over and rub my feet, just like this morning, okay? No one responded. Su Qianxi's lips twitched, feeling a splitting headache. People around her seemed to be talking, but she could not hear a word. Slowly turning around, she walked toward the bed without saying a word. So tired, so tired. Honey, hold me. I can't stand still. I'm going to fall. Her vision was getting darker and darker, and her body was getting weaker and weaker. Her legs softened, and she fell straight to the side. In the next few days, Su Qianxi spent all her time in sleep. She had a bad appetite, very bad. She basically relied on fluids to maintain her physical strength. Finally, on the 4th day, she asked to be discharged. Returning to the old house, she fell asleep again. When she woke up again, it was already evening. There was no light in the room, and it was very dark. When Su Qianxi opened her eyes, she immediately saw a tall figure standing by the bed. His figure was straight and he was wearing a suit. He seemed to have sensed that she had woken up and turned to look at her. His eyebrows were like a painting, his facial features were cold and delicate, and his jaw was tight. When he saw her, his eyes slightly curved. Su Qianxi looked at him incredulously and froze for a moment. Li Xiqing's eyes were full of love, looking at her tenderly. Turning around, he walked over slowly, reached out, and rubbed her hair. He smiled and said, "You are getting lazier and lazier." Su Qianxi's eyes were filled with tears. Reaching out, she wanted to touch his hand. However, when her hand just reached out, the handsome figure suddenly disappeared. In the dim light, there was nothing. No one. No Li Xiqing. There was nothing. Honey. Su Qianxi suddenly got up and reached for the place where he had just stood, but what she caught was only air. Nothing, nothing, nothing at all. Large drops of water fell. Su Qianxi hugged the quilt, hugged her knees, and curled up in the corner of the bed, crying loudly. The door was knocked, but Su Qianxi did not seem to hear it. She covered her head and did not move. The door was quickly opened. The old man walked in with his walking stick and turned on the lights. Luxurious crystal lamps hung high in the sky. Warm yellow light shone down, illuminating everything. Old Master Li slowly walked up, moved the stool by the dressing table, and sat down by the bed. Su Qianxi finally came back to herself, took a tissue to wipe her tears, and called, "Grandpa." Old Master Li looked at her with heartache. His eyes were slightly wet. He nodded and asked kindly, "Shall we eat?" "Grandpa hasn't eaten yet. I'm getting old and can't help being hungry." "I'm not hungry," she said with a hiccup. "How can I not be hungry? I didn't eat last night. I slept in the morning and noon. I have to eat a little." "You're not hungry, but the child is." Chapter 527. How could it be? How could it be? If it were not for these two children, if it were not for these two children, Su Qianxi's eyes dimmed. She stroked her belly and did not speak. "Grandpa is old, and I can't afford to lose anyone. It's best if all of you are alive and well, or bless me to kick my legs when I sleep at night, Grandpa." Su Qianxi interrupted him and sobbed again. "Don't say that." She had lost Li Xiqing, and she could not lose Grandpa. No one could. If even her grandfather was gone, then in this world, she would really have no more relatives. Her beloved Grandpa, her beloved Li Xiqing. Grandpa Li did not speak, looked at her, and said softly, "Come out for dinner. Your good friend is here to see you." "My good friend?" "A young man named Lu. He is polite and well-behaved. I asked him to stay for dinner. When you go out, we can start eating." Grandpa looked at her lovingly and stood up with a smile. "Hurry and wash up. Don't let your good friends see you as a joke." Su Qianxi was a bit dazed and nodded after a long while. When Grandpa went out, he closed the door. Su Qianxi got up and looked at the clothes she was wearing. It was a long-sleeved spring pajamas. Li Xiqing picked it for her. Lifting the quilt and sitting on the edge of the bed, Su Qianxi's feet touched the ground, which was cold. At this time, a pair of big hands would bring her a pair of furry shoes. While helping her put them on, he warned, "Next time, don't kick the shoes under the bed." Su Qianxi whispered with red eyes, squatted down, and took out a pair of shoes from under the bed. She put them on and went into the bathroom. His towel, his toothbrush, his cup, his razor, his aftershave, all of them were there, clean and tidy. Su Qianxi glanced at them and was slightly dazed. But soon, she began to wash up. She had not eaten for a few days, and she did not have much energy. After taking a shower and drying her hair, she walked into the cloakroom and opened the closet, which was full of clothes. 3/4 of them were hers, and only a very small part of them were his. However, when did she have so many? Since when did she have so many clothes? All of them were the latest and most fashionable spring clothes of the season. There were a few that she had worn before, but most of them were brand new, washed, and hung there quietly. She had never even seen them before. She took a floral dress that Li Xiqing had worn for her and put it on. However, she could not zip it up. She then realized that her body had become a bit clumsy. No matter how hard she tried, she could not pull herself up. "I'm just pregnant. It's not like I can't take care of myself. You dress me every day. What if I can't find my own clothes in the future? Then I'll help you wear them until you grow old." His deep and mellow voice seemed to still be ringing in her ears, softly tugging at her heartstrings. Su Qianxi looked at the wardrobe full, and after a long while, she whispered, "Honey, help me pull it up. I can't reach it." However, there was no response. Su Qianxi's heart was terribly empty, and the bursts of pain made her almost breathless. In the future, no one would help her put on clothes or zip her up. No one would suddenly appear when she was helpless and at a loss. No one would say anything or smile. Instead, they would stare at her gently and say, "Honey, let's go home." Chapter 528. The huge room was terrifyingly empty. In the future, she had to rely on herself. Everything she did, she had to rely on herself. Eat by herself, sleep by herself, and shower by herself. No one would warn her to wear shoes when she got out of bed, and no one would warn her not to sneak snacks before going to bed every day. Every day, no one would wake her up, accompany her to eat, buy her clothes. However, could she still live like this? Yes, wasn't it the same in her previous life? No one helped her, no one looked at her, and no one would care about her emotions. At that time, so many years had passed, hadn't it? Now, God just gave it all back to her again. That was all. What right did she have to become so unreasonable and delicate now? "It's all your fault." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to fall. "You spoiled me and then disappeared. What do you want me to do in the future?" What should I do? Her heart ached fiercely, and also fiercely empty. The person who had once lived in her heart had cruelly pulled himself out, leaving her alone to face everything, all alone and helpless. "Qian, are you done?" Grandpa's voice, with a kind tentative tone. Su Qianxi quickly wiped her tears, tried to make her voice calm, and said, "I'll be right there." After much effort, he finally zipped it up. She simply applied some makeup to make herself look less awkward. After that, she tied up her hair to make herself look more energetic. Patting her face, she finally walked out. The family, Li Sun, Li Xiao, Qin Shuhua, Li Jinnan, and Li Beixing were all there, as well as two outsiders who should not be here, Lu Yihan and Luo Zhan. At the moment when he saw Su Qianxi, under the rimless glasses, a pair of peach blossom eyes flashed with distress and tears. "You've lost weight." His voice was unusually low and hoarse. Luo Zhan noticed that something was wrong with him and elbowed him. Louis Han had a smile on his face and called, Qianqian. Su Qianxi also smiled, but the smile was just a little curve. Why are you here? Look at you. Louis Han did not avoid it, and his eyes fell on her belly. You must have not eaten well recently. You are too thin, even thinner than before you were pregnant. This is not good for the child. Not only did she lose weight, but her eyes were also swollen like walnuts. Although she had put on makeup, she still couldn't hide her paleness. All because of Li Xicheng. Lu Sa quickly brought out the dishes and shouted, "Come and eat." Mr. Lu also cooked something just now. It looks delicious. Come on, second young mistress, I heard that it's your favorite. It's still warm. Hearing that, Su Qianxi was slightly dazed. Louis Han sat up from the sofa, walked towards her, and said, I made spring bamboo shoots, your favorite. Do you remember? Spring bamboo shoots. She hadn't eaten Louis Han's spring bamboo shoots for many years. In the past, when she was poor and had no money to eat, he would always give himself half of his lunch. Later, he simply divided it into 2 portions and brought one for her every day. Louis Han was not from a wealthy family and had to rely on himself since he was a child. His life could be said to be very tight. Chapter 529. Thinking of the past, Su Qianxi smiled and nodded. I like it now too. Louis Han's eyes were softer, but he did not linger on her. He said ambiguously, it seems that preferences will not change all of a sudden. Ahem. Luo Zhan coughed softly and said, Come on, I'm not an outsider, so I won't stand on ceremony. Uncle, auntie, big brother, third brother, let's eat together. Li Jinan smiled. Luo Zhan, I haven't seen you for 2 or 3 years, and you have become more shameless. Well, it is not the first time we have met. Why are you so polite? Luo Zhan's smile made the atmosphere a little more lively. Captain Li also smiled and waved at Su Qianxi. He pointed to the seat next to him and said, Qianqian, come and sit here. Su Qianxi took Louis Han to wash his hands and sat next to Captain Li. Louis Han naturally sat next to Luo Zhan. Today's dishes were dazzling. Many of the dishes were her favorites, but Louis Han cooked more than just a plate of bamboo shoots. There was also eggplant with garlic sauce, shredded pork with mushrooms, fish head tofu soup. A lot of them, all of which were her favorites. She knew at a glance that these were Louis Han's dishes, and they looked completely different from Lu Sa's. She took a sip of the soup, which was very fragrant. The soup was very fresh and white, delicious and sweet. Su Qianxi's eyes were filled with tears, but she quickly shrank them back. She picked up the chopsticks and picked up a piece of eggplant. Familiar taste, familiar craftsmanship. But obviously, Louis Han's cooking was better than before. Delicious. Su Qianxi's voice was a little choked, but she soon smiled. Louis Han smiled, looking at her with satisfaction in his eyes. Everyone could see the subtle atmosphere, but no one pointed it out. Su Qianxi's appetite was surprisingly good today. She drank 2 bowls of soup and half a bowl of rice. Although he didn't eat much, it was much better than a few days ago. After dinner, Captain Li invited Louis Han to stay for tea. Su Qianxi sat on the sofa in the living room and listened to Louis Han talk about some strange adventures. Su Qianxi was not stupid. She could tell that half of it was true, but she still listened with great interest. In addition, Luo Zhan was rudely teasing her, making her laugh from time to time. Her mood suddenly became a lot better. Li Jinan and Li Beixing looked at each other from afar and didn't say a word. Li Xiao and Qin Shuhua also saw it, and a sense of crisis rose in their hearts. They looked behind them at the old man who had made all this happen. The old man sighed. That's it. We can't let Qianqian stay silent all the time. This kid has a good relationship with Qianqian. They've known each other for so long. He should be the person who understands her the best. But Xicheng just left. Qin Shuhua burst into tears. Dad, this is so unfair to Xicheng. They didn't dare to raise their voices. They were standing a little far from the living room. Captain Li looked in the direction of Su Qianxi and Louis Han and sighed. His voice was a bit sad. Calligraphy and painting, the one who suffers the most is not you, but Qianqian. You still have a husband and a son. Without Xicheng, Qianqian has nothing. Yes, there was nothing left. What Su Qianxi needed most now was to relax. Otherwise, in the long run, she might not be able to keep the baby in her belly. Chapter 530. About 9:00 in the evening, Luo Zhan received a phone call. It was O Ming. Where are you? I am at the old house of the Li family. Luo Zhan looked at the time. What's wrong? Don't go yet. Wait for me. O Ming quickly hung up the phone. About 10 minutes later, a black Bentley appeared at the door of the Li family's house. O Ming was wearing a burgundy suit. He stepped down, holding the tonic specially bought from Australia. He couldn't help feeling nervous. After standing at the door for a long time, he reached out and pressed the doorbell. The door was quickly opened, and the person who opened the door was Li Jinnan. When Li Jinnan saw O Ming, he was shocked. In front of him, O Ming had 2 dark circles, bloodshot eyes, and a tired face. He looked a little depressed. But his temperament was still extraordinary, like a prince in distress, and there was a bit of guilt in his eyes. Li Jinnan was very surprised to see O Ming like this and called, "Brother O? It's so late. Is your sister-in-law here?" "Yes." Li Jinnan opened the door to let him in and walked in. Almost at the same time, 3 pairs of eyes in the living room looked over. When O Ming saw Su Qianxi, the guilt in his eyes was even more. He walked over and put the tonics on the coffee table. He called, "Sister-in-law." Su Qianxi saw a lot of obviously valuable things, and her eyes fell on O Ming. She saw that O Ming suddenly took a step back and bowed deeply to Su Qianxi. Su Qianxi was shocked, immediately stood up and said, "What are you doing?" "I'm sorry." O Ming's voice was full of calmness, but at the same time, there was a strong sense of self-blame. I'm sorry." Luo Zhan and Louis Han looked at each other and did not speak. Li Jinnan was a little puzzled and asked, "Why are you apologizing?" Li Beixing stood tall and walked over, also puzzled. O Ming did not get up, but the voice of guilt and self-blame quickly came out. "That day, I called Li Xicheng to my place." Su Qianxi listened and pursed her lips. She thought of Li Xicheng's absent-minded look that day. He said, "Something happened to O Ming, and I have to go and see." However, after that, he never came back. With tears in her eyes, she looked at him and did not speak. That day, "If it weren't for me, sister-in-law wouldn't have been kidnapped by Tang Zhenghao, and second brother wouldn't have been in trouble." O Ming's voice was a little choked as he said this. "I'm sorry." Luo Zhan's eyes reddened. He stood up and walked over to O Ming. He put his hand on O Ming's shoulder. O Ming had grown up with Li Xicheng, Li Jinnan, and Li Beixing. But because they were the same age, the 2 of them had been going to school since kindergarten. O Ming and Li Xicheng had grown up together. Luo Zhan had only played with them in high school. These days, because of Li Xicheng, he had been sad for a long time. Even he was like that, let alone O Ming. It was not hard to imagine that Li Xicheng's departure was also a big blow to O Ming. In the past few days, O Ming had visited Su Qianxi in the hospital several times, but she was unconscious. It turned out that O Ming wanted to apologize to her in person. Chapter 531. How could unintentional be considered intentional? It was easy to dodge a spear in the open, but hard to defend against a stab in the dark. It was Tang Zhenghao who was too despicable and impossible to guard against. It was not O Ming's fault, nor was it Li Xicheng's fault. It was her fault. From the beginning, she was the variable of all this. If it were not for her, everything would be fine. Li Xiqing would lead the Li family to become a legend, the Tang family would be fine, and Li Xiqing would not be retaliated against. Everything would develop as it had in her previous lifetime. After seeing the three of them off, Su Qianxi went back to her room and fell asleep. She wanted to dream. "Mr. Li, can you come to my dream for a while? I want to see you." Lying in bed, Su Qianxi felt exhausted. Li Xiqing's pale face seemed to appear in her mind. He was lying on the ground, powerless. However, the pair of eyes that were looking at her were as vast as the stars in the sky, so beautiful that it was suffocating. "I love you, forever, I love you, forever." Life would only be perfect if there were countless regrets pieced together. If one had never been desperate, they would not know how precious today's happiness was. This was the first time Su Qianxi had such a dream. She dreamed that she was standing high in the air, seeing Tang Menjing like a proud peacock, standing next to a small lake a few hundred meters away from the old house, coldly watching the drowning person. After a long time, the person in the water stopped struggling. Tang Menjing sneered and turned around, only to see a tall and straight figure. Li Xiqing looked at her coldly, his face tense. Wearing a dark gray casual coat, his hands in his pockets, he looked at her quietly. Tang Menjing's expression changed dramatically. She hurriedly wanted to explain, but Li Xiqing did not pay attention to her. He slowly stepped into the clear lake. The winter wind was very chilly. Li Xiqing stepped into the lake step by step, took off his coat, and then dove in, pulling the drowning woman out. Su Qianxi was soaked in the water, and the horrible fire scar on her face was shocking. Li Xiqing pushed her body to the lake, soaking her. He immediately put her down by the lake and gave her first aid. Tang Menjing watched all this, her face pale. In the end, she did not come back to life. He gently closed her eyes and looked at Tang Menjing coldly. Police cars surrounded them and blocked the left and right sides of the road. Li Xiqing's hair was still dripping water, but his eyes were colder than the lake water. He said, "You disappoint me." What happened next? Tang Menjing was sent to prison. Tang Zhenghao was found to have close cooperation with the drug trafficking group, and the Tang group completely collapsed. Rong Haiyue was suspected of being involved in drug trafficking and was sentenced to death. The real drug trafficker, Rong Anna, went away with Bo Xiao and continued to sing the song of crime. Li Xiqing, on the other hand, had never married until he was old. Many years later, Li Xiqing was interviewed on a show. The host asked Li Xiqing, who was in his 40s but looked like he was in his early 30s, "Mr. Li, why don't you get married? Everyone thought that you and Miss Tang would get married, and then she was sent to prison. What a pity. Is it because of Miss Tang that you are not married now?" Li Xiqing shook his head, looking indifferent and calm. His eyes contained infinite wisdom and depth, as well as the sharpness of more than 40 years of experience. His eyes softened slightly and he said, "I was married when I was 26. My wife's name was Su Qianxi." "What about her?" "Dead." "Do you love her?" Li Xiqing's eyes were deeper, but he did not speak. Love. Deep love. In another parallel universe, there was another Li Xiqing who loved another Su Qianxi. Very, very much. Give the ending of the previous life. Don't think too much. The male lead did not go back to the previous life, just to give the previous life an ending. Chapter 532. Love. Deep love. In another parallel universe, there was another Li Xiqing who loved another Su Qianxi. Very, very much. The familiar ringtone woke Su Qianxi up from her sleep. When she opened her eyes, it was already dawn. The small alarm clock at the bedside showed 8 a.m. She picked up the phone and saw it was Qingyu. What did Qingyu want? Su Qianxi picked up the phone. "Hello? Madam? I know you may be very sad now, but this matter can't be delayed. Can you come to the company at 2:00 in the afternoon?" The company. Li Xiqing's company. Yes, Li Xiqing was gone, and there was no one to take care of his company. The Lee group must be in a mess now, and she actually forgot about this. Sitting up, Su Qianxi listened to her. Yes, since the news of Boss's death came out, the stock market of the Lee group has plummeted to an unprecedented low in the past few days. The shareholders are anxious to hold a shareholders meeting and ask for a new president, but Boss holds 55.3% of the shares. He is gone, and you are the first in line. I hope you can come to the company and attend the shareholders meeting at 2:00 in the afternoon. Is that okay? Qingyu did not expect that Boss, such a powerful person, would be gone just like that. In the past few days, Qingyu was almost blind from crying. After working for Boss for so many years, to be fair, Li Xiqing not only valued her but also treated her very well. Even when he was not married, Qingyu had a crush on him. After all, the man standing in the clouds was admired and looked up to by everyone. Although she did not have the guts to hook up with him, it was impossible to say that she had no feelings for him. However, life still had to go on, and she still had to go to work. In the past few days when Boss was away, she had taken care of a lot of things. After all, Qingyu's reputation in the company was second only to Li Xiqing. However, this was not a long-term plan after all. In just a few days, many shareholders had been desperately trying to elect a new president. Some were even more extreme, saying that Li Xiqing would sell his shares and leave. The Li Group was built by Li Xiqing from nothing, from a small company to the current situation, all because of Li Xiqing's painstaking efforts. In any case, Qingyu could not watch the Li Group collapse. However, no matter how capable she was just an assistant. Okay, I'll be there in the afternoon. I'll wait for you. After hanging up the phone, she came out of the bathroom and saw a few missed calls. The destination was the imperial capital. Was it Rong Haiyue? He seemed to have been seriously injured that day. I wonder how he is now. She called back, and it was quickly picked up. After a few seconds of silence, no one spoke first. After a while, she said, "Qianxi?" The voice belonged to Rong Xian. "What's up?" Rong Xian paused and said, "Rong Haiyue was seriously injured. His skin was severely burned, so he did not go to see you. Now he just woke up." She paused and added, "He has been in a coma for 4 or 5 days." He had been in a coma for 4 to 5 days due to severe burns. Although Su Qianxi did not have much affection for her biological father, hearing such words, she still felt a little uncomfortable. "He wants to see you." Rong Xian's voice was low and sounded uncertain. Chapter 533. How could it be? Rong Haiyue was the last person to see Li Xiqing. Why was Li Xiqing dead and Rong Haiyue still alive? Su Qianxi knew that she should not think like this, but with such a big explosion, the chance of survival was very low. How did Rong Haiyue escape? Suddenly feeling that she was very cruel and vicious, Su Qianxi asked, "Where are you?" Rong Xian heard this question and suddenly became happy, saying, "Kingstown First Military Hospital." After a night's rest, Su Qianxi's eyes had become a lot less swollen. She simply put on some light makeup to make her face not look so ugly. When she arrived at the destination, Su Qianxi bought a fruit basket and went into the hospital. They stayed in a high-end single ward. As soon as Su Qianxi entered, she smelled a strong medicine smell. It was very pungent, heavier than any smell in the hospital. Su Qianxi was caught off guard and felt a little nauseous, but soon, she suppressed it. Rong Xian saw her, and her eyes trembled slightly. She went up to take her fruit basket, with some pity in her eyes, and softly said, "You are thinner and haggard." Rong Xian was the same. In the past few days, Rong Xian had also lost a lot of weight. Was it to take care of Rong Haiyue? Su Qianxi smiled slightly, but did not intend to pay attention to her. Her eyes fell on Rong Haiyue. Rong Haiyue was wrapped in white bandages all over his body, almost like a mummy. Fortunately, there was no large injury on his face, which was still visible. It was just that his eyebrows and eyelashes were all burned, which looked a bit funny and weird. However, a pair of eagle eyes were still sharp, but his spirit was slightly sluggish. It should be because he just woke up. You are here. Su Qianxi nodded, and Rong Xian brought her a stool. Sit down. Su Qianxi did not hesitate at all, sat down, and thanked her. Rong Haiyue looked at her belly and said, "The child is fine." Su Qianxi subconsciously reached out to touch her belly, smiled slightly, and asked, "How did you escape? There was such a big fire, such a big explosion. Didn't you go in to save him? What about him?" Rong Xian heard Su Qianxi's words and felt a little dissatisfied. Rong Haiyue did not speak but looked at her with his eagle eyes. Su Qianxi felt bad, but she still couldn't help but pout and ask, "You said you would bring him back to see me. Why did you lie to me? Is it fun to lie to me with him? I'm sorry." Rong Haiyue's voice was a little hoarse and weak. He sounded very weak. "When I went in, he had already been taken away." Her tears stopped, and she looked up at him incredulously. "What did you say?" "When I went in, the policeman who had stayed there was killed. He was shot between the eyebrows and dead. Li Xiqing was not there." Su Qianxi's heart, which had been in despair for a few days, was suddenly ignited. Holding her breath, she looked at him nervously. "The policewoman and I chased after them from the back door. I was in front, and she was behind, but suddenly, there was an explosion. We both flew out together, and then I don't know what happened." "You mean, he did not die, and he was rescued?" She stood up excitedly and looked at him. Chapter 534. Su Qianxi heard this and could not recover for a long time. Her tears flowed freely, and her brain was buzzing. Her head was echoing, "He is still alive, he is still alive, is he really still alive?" After a long while, she smiled through her tears. "He is still alive, he is still alive. As long as he did not die in there, there was still hope for life. Bo Xiao still needed him to do things, so he would not die, right? Next, as long as she found Bo Xiao or Rong Anna, she could find him, right? However, since they did this, they probably want you to think that Li Xiqing is dead. These people have ulterior motives, so it is better to go with the flow and develop according to the results they want." "What do you mean?" "Let the outside world know that Li Xiqing is dead. First let the enemy relax their vigilance, and then we secretly find him. This may have a greater chance of success." Su Qianxi heard Rong Haiyue's words and gritted her teeth. "Can I trust you?" Rong Haiyue was slightly dazed and looked at her. "Why do you ask?" "You are Rong Anna's father, and it was Rong Anna and her gang who hurt my husband like that. You are Rong Anna's parents. Will you really help me?" Hearing Su Qianxi's words, Rong Haiyue's heart seemed to be stabbed, and he felt hysterical pain. His eyes fell on Rong Xian, and his heart was very complicated. Although he knew Rong Anna's background, she was his daughter after all. For so many years, Rong Haiyue really loved this girl. However, after knowing Su Qianxi's background, Rong Haiyue felt that he owed this child a lot, and he might not be able to pay it back in this life. Both sides were children, and both were daughters. No wonder Su Qianxi would have doubts. Rong Haiyue smiled bitterly and said, "You are also my daughter, Qianxi." The sound of high heels sounded behind him, and Rong Xian walked over to Su Qianxi. With a sincere face, she said, "I'm sorry." Rong Xian was wearing a green long-sleeved cheongsam, looking noble and tall. "I am sorry. I have always known your whereabouts and your movements, but I deliberately did not tell Rong Haiyue." Rong Xian looked indifferent and did not have much expression, so that when such an apology came out of her mouth, Su Qianxi did not feel that she was sincere. "Rong Haiyue doesn't even know of your existence. If he knew, he would definitely find you, take you with him, and give you double the treatment of Rong Anna. It's my fault, I'm sorry." Su Qianxi heard this and curled her lips. She stood up and took her bag from the stool. She said, "Mr. Rong, I will consider the problem you mentioned. Thank you for telling me this. Then she turned around and was about to leave. Qianxi. Rong Haiyue looked at her, his eyes sad and sad. I am your father. Su Qianxi paused, her eyes slightly dim. You are also Rong Anna's father, aren't you? Rong Haiyue was speechless. Looking at her back, his heart was filled with grief. She is the daughter that you have raised for more than 20 years. If you can only choose between me and her, you will definitely choose her, right? Rong Anna's gang had hurt her man like that. Did she want her to be her sister? Chapter 535. No, Rong Xian suddenly said. Su Qianxi stopped and did not look back. If I can only choose one, I will choose you. Rong Xian's voice was calm, with a hint of guilt. Rong Anna is a tool I deliberately used to retaliate against Rong Haiyue, but for you. You should know Su Han, right? Su Han, Su Qianxi's nominal mother. Of course, she knew. Back then, Su Han was kidnapped and sold to the Shirwan Mountains. I was the one who saved her. She was married to an old man in his 70s and gave birth to a daughter. Not long after giving birth, she stopped our car that was about to go to the station in the wilderness. Rong Xian slowly walked up to Su Qianxi and looked at her. At that time, I represented the capital art troupe to teach in Shirwan Mountain. I was pregnant for more than 9 months and was about to give birth. I was going back to the capital to give birth the next day, but I met Su Han. Shirwan Mountain, the legendary place where Rong Xian's body was found. Su Han was a very poor woman. When she ran into us, she asked us to send her back to Kingstown and handed the child to me, telling me her identity and her background. That child is Rong Anna? No, that child was found by her father, but Su Han's body was left in the wilderness by him. At that time, I originally wanted to throw you away after you were born, but I couldn't bear to do that, so I decided to beat you at your own game. I made up your identity as Su Han's daughter, and I was the one who gave you your name. Rong Xian suddenly curled her lips and looked at Su Qianxi's face. You really look like me, Qianxi. Su Qianxi looked at her, frowned deeply, and did not speak. Later, I accidentally saved the old leader of the Li family. The Rong family and the Li family have always had an inexplicable hostile relationship. So, if I wanted revenge, I would do it thoroughly. I used my own life to threaten Li Sun to let his best grandson marry my daughter. I told him that my name was Su Han, and my daughter was Su Qianxi. I was the sister of Su Jinghua in Kingstown. Su Jinghua checked my DNA and knew that I was not his sister's daughter. No one will abandon the Li family. Su Jinghua is not stupid. Didn't he get you back? I even let you be a rich young lady for 2 years. Have you forgotten? Su Qianxi pursed her lips and looked at Rong Xian, feeling a bit cold. This woman was too scary. There was no big expression on Rong Xian's face. Looking at Su Qianxi, her eyes were full of pity and compassion. I hated your father at that time, very, very much. I wanted to strangle him when he was sleeping, but I didn't. I might as well take my revenge on his daughter. I thought that I would have the pleasure of revenge, but I didn't. Rong Xian reached out to Su Qianxi and seemed to want to touch her, but Su Qianxi took a step back and avoided her hand. Chapter 536. Why should she make him happy? Rong Haiyue was a criminal, the devil who raped her. She did not want to be with him at all. He forced her to sleep with him, forced her to get pregnant, and forced her to have a child. Seeing him raising someone else's child, raising that bastard, I felt indescribably comfortable. Rong Xian took a deep breath and took back her tears. Later, he found that I often went to Kingstown, and I noticed that he was following me. Since then, I did not dare to go to the orphanage, but every year I still sent money to you to buy you some clothes and some fresh toys. Yes, she remembered. The children in the orphanage were very envious of her. Even the dean said that Su Qianxi was a special child. Ha! She was indeed unique. Rong Hyue listened in the hospital bed, looking at the ceiling, and never saying a word. His sharp eagle eyes were covered with a layer of mist, and in the emptiness, there was resentment. But Rong Anna, I have never regarded her as my own daughter. I only have one daughter. Chinsi, I am your mother. At the end of the sentence, the word mother was already with a strong crying tone. Rong Xian's tears fell, but they were quickly wiped away and covered again. You can blame me or hate me, I admit it, but this is all caused by me. Rong Hyue does not know anything. If you are angry, take it out on me. Rong Hyue saved your life. He was shot in the arm and almost died due to excessive blood loss. This time, in order to save you and your husband, he was blown up like this, and his body has been severely burned. Is it not enough? Was it not enough? Was it enough? Was it not enough? Su Qianxi's mind was now a mess. Looking at Rong Xian's tears, her eyes were strangely dry. It was just that his heart felt like it was being hammered by an awl, causing a dull pain. Su Qianxi did not want to listen anymore. She stepped away and walked directly to the door of the ward. Qianxi, Rong Xian called again, but this time, Su Qianxi did not stop. No matter what happened in the past, Mom and Dad will not hurt you. The bodyguard, Shuang Yu, had always been guarding the door. Seeing her coming out, she immediately followed. Su Qianxi walked faster, and soon after she walked out of the corridor, she heard the roar behind her again. Remember to come back when you think it through. We will wait for you. We'll wait for you. Hearing these words, Su Qianxi finally couldn't help it, and her eyes became misty again. Pressing the button on the elevator, she walked in with her head down, not wanting others to see her strangeness. When Yang saw her coming out of the hospital, he drove the car to the roadside and let her get on the car with Shuangyu. In the car, she called Li Jinnan. Li Jinnan seemed to be busy. It took him a long time to answer the phone. When he picked it up, he was a little out of breath. Hello, second sister-in-law. Uncle, are you busy? I'm fighting against Big Brother. Phew, I haven't trained in a long time. Are you free in the afternoon? Come to the company. The shareholders' meeting will be held at 2:00 in the afternoon. Also, I have something important to tell you. Me? Second brother's company? Yes, I want you to take over the Li Group. Wow, that won't do. I've never tried doing business before. You can do it. Li Jinnan was very smart and capable. In his previous life, he had started an entertainment company with Li Xiqing for fun, and it was also very successful. Hearing that, Li Jinnan panted harder and said, Okay, see you in the afternoon. Chapter 537. Yes. Li Jinnan shouted, Brother, sister-in-law is looking for you. Li Beixing also came quickly, and his breath was obviously much calmer than Li Jinnan's. Sister-in-law, are you looking for me? Brother, you are right. If he is alive, I want to see him. If he is dead, I want to see his body. Li Beixing heard the words, raised an eyebrow, took a sip of mineral water, and waited for her to continue. I will tell you in the evening. Goodbye, brother. Li Beixing was speechless. Wasn't this a joke? After arousing his curiosity, she did not say anything. She was simply a hooligan. Li Beixing did not know whether to laugh or cry, but when he heard Su Qianxi's obviously relaxed tone, he also relaxed a lot. When she arrived at the company, Su Qianxi had already fixed her makeup. When she took the VIP elevator to the president's office on the top floor, it was exactly 12:00 at noon. Qingyu was very busy. Seeing that the VIP elevator actually stopped, she was shocked, and then there was anger on her face. Who was so bold and dared to go in the elevator for the boss? The elevator door opened, and Qingyu was about to lose her temper. After seeing Su Qianxi and Shuangyu, her anger suddenly disappeared. Madam? All the people in the secretary's office looked over and shouted in unison, "Hello, madam. Just call me Su Qianxi." Su Qianxi smiled. "Have you all eaten? If you haven't eaten yet, let's go eat together. I am also hungry." Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They were obviously overwhelmed by the unexpected favor. Qingyu looked at her watch and nodded. "Okay, everyone go eat. The restaurant should be ready. Let the kitchen help me bring it up. I want, Assistant Cheng, come with us. I have something to tell you." Qingyu was a little surprised, glanced at the work progress in her hand, and nodded. "Okay, let's go." It was the first time that Su Qianxi came to the staff cafeteria of the Li Group. As soon as she entered, she was surrounded by a lot of people. Su Qianxi followed Qingyu to the CEO's private room and asked about Su Qianxi's hobbies. After telling the kitchen to make a few dishes, Qingyu turned around and sat down. "Qingyu, if Li Xiqing is still alive," Qingyu heard the words, pursed her lips sadly, looked at her with some sympathy, and immediately changed the topic. "How old is the child?" Su Qianxi was dazed. 18 weeks. "What's wrong?" "It's really twins. What a big belly. I'm so envious." Qingyu smiled. "You can get 2 at once. It's amazing." "Yes, he hopes it's a boy and a girl. A few days ago, the doctor told us that it's fraternal twins with 2 placentas. The placentas are a bit forward, but the babies are very healthy." She smiled. "When he comes back, I guess he can really see 2 children, a boy and a girl. The boy looks like him, and the girl looks like me. Then life will be perfect." Su Qianxi was laughing, but Cheng was Qing Xicheng. "Xicheng, you." Xicheng, Qing Qianxi Xicheng, Su, for Su, for Su. She. Xicheng, Xicheng Shi, Xicheng Su, Xicheng, Su, Xicheng, Su, is, Li, Xicheng, Li Xicheng, and Su. I, Su. She. I, Li, and I. Li, he, Cheng, 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 Li. 4. Chapter 538. Why couldn't she accept the fact? After such a big explosion, the chance of surviving was almost 0. Moreover, she heard that before the big explosion, he had been beaten to multiple fractures, and it was impossible for him to escape. In that case, how could he still be alive? How was it possible? Qingyu's heart was sour, and her sympathy for Su Qianxi surged uncontrollably. She was still so young, and she was still pregnant with 2 children. How could she live in the future? Was she going to be a widow like this? She was only 21 years old. The age of a flower, the age of a flower. Thinking of this, Qingyu cried even louder and said, "Madam, accept the reality. He will not come back. He is dead. In that case, even if he was not killed by the explosion, he would be burned to death, Qingyu." Su Qianxi's voice was a bit annoyed, and her beautiful eyes were filled with unspeakable anger. "Don't curse him. He is not dead. Didn't you find the body? If he is alive, I want to see him. If he is dead, I want to see his body." Moreover, Rong Haiyue saw with his own eyes that Li Xiqing was rescued, didn't he? Li Xiqing was not inside, and even Rong Haiyue escaped. What reason did Li Xiqing have to die? Rong Haiyue's words in the hospital suddenly echoed in her mind. These people have ulterior motives. It is better to go with the flow and develop according to the results they want. Su Qianxi originally wanted to tell Qingyu what Rong Haiyue had just told her. But at this moment, she did not want to say what she wanted to say. Qingyu thought that she was not willing to accept the fact, so why not go with the flow? Although Qingyu had been with Li Xiqing for many years, her relationship with Rong Rui was not ordinary. What if Rong Rui also had a connection with the drug gang? Thinking of this, Su Qianxi's face became extremely firm. Looking at Qingyu, she said, "He will not die. One day, he will come back." Qingyu pursed her lips and picked up a tissue to wipe her tears. Su Qianxi's eyes were slightly red, and her voice softened. "He will come back to see me and the children. He has not named the children yet. How can he die? He will not die." When the dishes were served, the chef heard Su Qianxi's words. As a man, he couldn't help feeling sad. Putting down the food, he opened the door and went out. As soon as he returned to the kitchen, he told his colleagues about it. The thing that spreads the fastest in the world is not the source of fire, but the rumor. Within a few hours, almost everyone in the company knew that Su Qianxi was unwilling to accept the news of her husband's death. All of a sudden, she became a synonym for stubbornness and stubbornness. After the meal, Qingyu did not speak again. As soon as they went upstairs, Su Qianxi asked Li Xiqing to bring her all the urgent documents that needed to be dealt with. Su Qianxi sat in the seat where Li Xiqing usually sat and quickly read the documents. However, as he stared at the documents, he couldn't help but recall the time when he was sitting here. She looked at the small bed that she had been lying on. From this angle, she could see the small bed and the table. "Mrs. Li, mind your image. There's no one else around. This position is comfortable. It seems like you want to try. Pervert." Thinking of the past, Su Qianxi smiled, got up, walked over, and closed the door. Then, she focused on the things in her hand. Although she had not touched this kind of thing for more than a year, some simple and basic things were not difficult for her. Chapter 539. The person who wrote the plan, Lu Changqing. Su Qianxi was very impressed by this person's name. In her previous lifetime, Li Xiqing seemed to value this person very much. As far as she heard, Lu Changqing was a decent person who loved his wife and children. However, because he was too simple and honest, unwilling to curry favor with those in power, and did not know how to flatter others, his popularity in the company was very poor. He was also a veteran employee of the Li Group, but in the past 4 or 5 years, his position had not been promoted much. In her previous lifetime, because of a land development case, he was criticized and suppressed by the shareholders, but that plan was accepted by Li Xiqing, and he was promoted to project director. The whole project, under his strict supervision, achieved great success, and became an important push to push the Li Group to a new peak. This person, now, she dialed the internal line and called a secretary in. The secretary saw that Su Qianxi was looking at the material seriously, and she felt a little disdainful. Even though he tried his best to hide it, he still couldn't hide it from his eyes. Su Qianxi understood her thoughts very well, and did not mind directly asking her about Lu Changqing. Sure enough, it was not much different from what she remembered. His position was the director of the development department. "Help me call him in." "Okay." The secretary closed the door and went out. Soon, a man who looked a little fat came in. He seemed to be in his early 30s and looked honest. When he saw Su Qianxi, his eyes were full of amazement and unconcealed uneasiness. "Madam, what can I do for you?" Lu Changqing's face was a little red, and he lowered his head, not daring to look at her. "Did you write this proposal?" Su Qianxi put the proposal on the table and asked. Lu Changqing came forward, turned a few pages, and nodded with a red face. "There are so many pieces of land in the Xiangxin new town, but you chose this one. This land is not only occupied by a large number of people who refuse to move, but also because of the European style, the price has been artificially high. Why do you think of bidding for this piece of land?" Lu Changqing heard this question and was a little nervous. He scratched his head and stuttered, It's okay. I'm very interested in your project. Tell me what you think." Lu Changqing blushed and muttered, "I think this may be an opportunity. The European-style entertainment club is here, but, because of land restrictions, there are many things in it that are not perfect. I think we can." Perhaps because Su Qianxi was staring at him, Lu Changqing's voice was not very fluent. Su Qianxi looked down at the other files in her hand and listened. Sure enough, after Lu Changqing noticed that she was no longer staring at him, his voice became smoother and faster. In the end, Lu Changqing was still a little excited. His voice became louder and louder as he said, I think my plan is very feasible. According to the investigation and calculation. His voice was powerful and confident. It was completely different from when he first came in. After talking for about 10 minutes, Lu Changqing excitedly put his hands on the edge of the desk and asked, What do you think? After listening to his words, she glanced at the time. It was already 1:50. There were still 10 minutes before the shareholders' meeting. Chapter 540. Hearing that, Lu Changqing was a little unconvinced. He took his hand off the edge of the desk but did not speak. Su Qianxi knew that what she said had no weight. If it was him who said this at the moment, then he would definitely have nothing to say. Tapping on the table with a pen, Su Qianxi's voice was gentle, and she looked at him calmly. The secretary came in to give Su Qianxi a glass of juice and happened to hear her words. She pouted disdainfully, put down the juice, and quietly walked out. Closing the door, the secretary quickly walked back to the secretary's office. As soon as she went in and saw that Qing Yu was not there, she began to complain. Does she really think that because the boss is dead, she is the female president? I just saw what she said to Lu Changqing, and she even said, not perfect enough. Come on, this is not the way to pretend, okay? Another secretary was looking at the computer and helping Qing Yu. Hearing this, she looked up, adjusted her glasses, and said, No way, she really wants to take over the Li Group? It seems so. A lot of information is in front of her, and it looks quite good. However, I don't know how good it is. This is hard to say. The big boss is so powerful. There is no reason that his wife does not know anything, right? Gee, when the big boss was still alive, how many times did she come here? Every time she comes, she is so delicate. She needs to be held by the big boss, as if she is afraid that others do not know that they have a good relationship. And the big boss is such a chauvinist. It is impossible for him to let his woman intervene in his career. Wow, this is too shocking. Could it be that this woman deliberately killed Big Boss just to get the company? Wow, this is too shocking. No way, so cruel. I don't think it is possible. He is the father of the children. You see, her belly is only 4 months old, and it looks like it is 5 or 6 months old. Twins. This is hard to say. I don't think she is a newbie. Could it be that she has been planning for a long time? No, she is also a finance major. It is normal to know a little. Let me tell you, peng peng, a loud knocking sound rang out. Everyone was startled and hurriedly walked back to their respective rooms. Qing Yu stood at the door with a sullen face and flew into a rage. You have nothing to do, right? You have so much time to gossip behind other people's backs. Looks like your work schedule is too little. Everyone shrunk their necks, not daring to speak. She angrily assigned the work and quickly left in her high heels. The secretaries looked at each other and stuck out their tongues. Someone said, I'll go and see how she's doing. Pfft, go. Remember to come back for gossip. All right. The secretary opened the door and walked out. Coincidentally, he bumped into Lu Changqing, who was walking out with his development plan. The expression on his face was indescribably dignified. Lu Changqing did not notice that he was being stared at. He blankly returned to the chair for a few minutes. After digesting what Su Qianxi had just said, he suddenly smiled. No wonder you are Li Xiqing's wife. Amazing. The shareholders' meeting began on time. When Su Qianxi came in, everyone was already there. Seeing Su Qianxi, many people felt bored. Li Jinan followed Su Qianxi in, looked around at the shareholders, and raised an eyebrow. Chapter 541. That's right. When President Li was here, he did not dare to let us wait for so long. But you, a new boss, want to make changes? Or, you don't want to come to this meeting at all? In that case, you don't have to force yourself. Anyway, Li Xiqing was dead, and the company was just an empty shell. What kind of waves could a woman do? It was better for everyone to transfer their shares together. While the Li Corporation was still valuable, they could exchange some money to invest in other things. Otherwise, they would lose money instead of making money. It was not only one or two people who had this idea. The company had not been established for a long time, and there were 8 shareholders in total. Some were partners who worked with Li Xiqing in the past, and some were older shareholders who later invested. Most of the people who were talking were old men about the same age as Li Xiao. On the contrary, some young people just looked at Su Qianxi and remained silent. Su Qianxi looked at her watch and said, "If I remember correctly, the shareholders' meeting should be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It has been 2 minutes since I came in and listened to your accusations. Now it is 14:01. That is to say, I came in at 13:59. Am I late?" "No," said a young man sitting in the front. He looked about 30 years old, and he was very capable. Fang Chen, one of the largest shareholders of the company, had followed Li Xiqing from the beginning. "Well, President Li will arrive 3 minutes earlier." "Oh. So, I am not late." "What makes you say that?" Su Qianxi sat down in the chairman's seat. "My husband's habits are not my habits. You used to be used to my husband's habits, so in the future, you will have to get used to my habits." An older man sneered, "You mean, you want to be the president of the company? Are you kidding me? How can a woman be the decision maker of the company? Such a big company, don't let it fall in your hands." "Well, if that's the case, we have nothing to say. The largest share is in your hands. When your husband died, the entire company is in your hands. Isn't it still up to you?" Su Qianxi listened to these words with a cold face and sneered, "Yes, my husband is gone, and I have the final say. But my husband is not dead. Please don't curse him. He just left temporarily. It won't be long before he comes back to take over the Li Corporation. But before that, I am the highest decision maker here." Hearing this, the surrounding people fell silent. Indeed, Li Xiqing's death was hard to accept. Everyone looked at Su Qianxi with some sympathy. "I now have a plan for the land bidding. According to my observation and calculation, I think it is very feasible. The preliminary plan has come out, and the specifics need to be improved." She asked Qingyu to send the copy of the plan to someone else. All the shareholders were frowning as they watched. All the shareholders were. Obviously, they were not optimistic about this project. This was completely within Su Qianxi's expectations. Telling them her thoughts and plans, she observed their reactions one by one. Chapter 542. Su Qianxi looked at him. She seemed to have seen this person before. When the Li Group was losing money, this person donated money and ran away. Later, he was caught and suffered from Li Xiqing's brutal revenge. He spent a lifetime in prison. She used to think that Li Xiqing was too tough. Now thinking about it, her original idea was ridiculous. "Qingyu." "Yes." "How many shares does this gentleman have?" 9%. "Who else wants me to buy back the shares?" Qingyu stared at Su Qianxi. No way, she really wanted to buy back the shares? That would be a huge expense. Recently, the stock market of the Li Group had plummeted, and they had lost a lot of money. If these shares were bought back, it would cost so much money. "The Li Group, Mrs. Li, this..." But before Qingyu finished, someone said directly, "Although I still have feelings for the Li Group, I am not very optimistic. I will quit." "Qingyu, register, how many shares does he have?" 8%, me too, another man said. 7%. Su Qianxi looked at them and said, "Okay, then I will buy back your shares at the market price, but I hope you think about it clearly." In the future, whether the Li Group succeeds or fails, it has nothing to do with you anymore. Seeing that she really wanted to buy back the shares, Qingyu panicked and shouted, "Mrs. Li, this is not good. Our company can't afford so much money. I can take out my husband's private property, but these people will not be accepted by the Li Group in the future." When the Li Group was glorious, they were there. When Li Xiqing had an accident, they ran away one by one. Such ungrateful people, we don't need them. Su Qianxi's voice was flat, but what she said went straight to the hearts of those people. That's right, isn't he an ingrate? However, the Li Group was built by Li Xiqing, and they had no right to touch the position of CEO. If they did not quit at this time, they would just wait for death. Despite what Su Qianxi said, they still did not change their minds. Seeing their determination, Su Qianxi said disappointedly, "Contact a lawyer and draft a share transfer agreement, Qingyu." Su Qianxi knew that it was obviously irrational for her to do this kind of thing at this time. However, the next project, she knew that it would definitely bring the Li Group back to life. Why did she have to take advantage of them? Su Qianxi did not explain to Qingyu, but drove away those who were about to quit and discussed the development of the new project with the remaining 5 shareholders. "I'm not optimistic about this project, but I won't quit," Fang Chen said. "Mrs. Li, why did you choose this piece of land? The initial investment is very huge. If it was the Li Corporation in the past, this project would not be a problem at all, but you've seen the Li Corporation's recent situation. If this project is implemented, it will undoubtedly make things worse." She pursed her lips and shook her head. "Do you know why I chose this place? Here is the land I am going to bid for. This is a European-style leisure club. Because of the scope limitation, there are many things in the European-style club that are not perfect. We can take advantage of this loophole. Moreover, this place is bordered by the Kingstown River in the east and Guang City in the west." Chapter 543. His mouth was dry, and Qingyu handed him a glass of water and listened attentively. Li Jinnan, who had never been in contact with the company, was confused. At the same time, he admired Su Qianxi. 3 days later, Su Qianxi asked Lu Changqing to make a PowerPoint presentation of the complete plan. During the meeting, the pros and cons of the project and the investment calculation were all explained. Su Qianxi appointed herself as the president of the company and appointed Lu Changqing as the project director. He was fully responsible for the project and let Li Jinnan also learn in the company. Sure enough, Lu Changqing's ability and effectiveness were far beyond everyone's expectations. In just 2 months, all the original residents had been cleared, and the project had begun. Su Qianxi was very busy during this time, and her belly was getting bigger and bigger. Pregnant with twins, Su Qianxi was already unable to walk when she was 8 months pregnant. She simply waited at home for delivery. Many things that Li Jinnan or Qingyu could handle were handled on the spot. If they could not handle it, it would fall into Su Qianxi's hands. Su Qianxi used to work with Li Xiqing for a while, and she had the ability to predict many things that others did not have. The company had been steadily rising. Because it was a bit inconvenient to move, Su Qianxi asked Shuangyu to continue to protect her, and Captain Li also called Nanny Rong over to take care of her. Li Beixing rarely came home, and the first thing he did when he came back was to find Su Qianxi. When Su Qianxi opened the door, Li Beixing looked dignified and seemed to be a bit hesitant. Looking at her, he said, "There is news of Xiqing." Hearing these words, Su Qianxi was stunned, then held his hand and was pleasantly surprised. "Really? Where is he? How is he doing? Is the injury better? Why hasn't he come back yet?" A series of questions made Li Beixing's heart uncomfortable. He handed the information in his hand to her and said, "You should be mentally prepared. Xiqing's injury was very serious. He once went to the 3rd hospital of Kingstown for treatment, but this person is only suspected. There is no direct evidence to prove that this person is Xiqing." Su Qianxi took the information and saw a color photo at a glance. The person in the photo was sitting in a wheelchair with only a pair of eyes exposed. His body was wrapped in bandages, so his figure and face could not be seen clearly. The time when this person was admitted to the hospital coincided with the time when Sicheng disappeared. They seemed to be about the same age. However, at that time, he was treated as a nameless patient. A secret person had been paying for his medical expenses, but he never showed up. Su Qianxi looked at the photo for a long time. After staying in the hospital for more than a month, he was discharged on his own when his body was slightly better. Since he had already paid the medical fees, the hospital did not detain him. I ordered people to check the surrounding surveillance cameras, but they could not find any. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. Her face became paler and paler. He placed his hand on his stomach and furrowed his brows. Li Beixing looked at her and continued, I don't think it's Li Sicheng. If it's really him, he will come back by himself. So far, this is the only one that matches him. I am still investigating his background and whereabouts, but I am sure that Li Sicheng is still alive. Su Qianxi frowned, held the door frame, and said, Brother, my stomach hurts. Chapter 544. The previous chapter has been revised. You can read it again to make up for your regrets. The fetus was only 8 months old, and Su Qianxi had already been sent to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, her water had broken. Su Qianxi kept thinking about what Li Beixing had just said, Li Sicheng must be alive. Yes, he must be alive. But why did he leave? Why did he not come back to see her? Even if he did not see her, it would be good to see the baby. She was about to give birth. Could he know? Su Qianxi's eyes were full of tears, and the pain from her lower abdomen made her feel extremely uncomfortable. There was a lot of noise around, and Su Qianxi's mind was blank. She did not know when she had entered the delivery room or what had happened around her. When the dazzling incandescent light shone down, Su Qianxi seemed to see the face she had been thinking about day and night. Li Sicheng was in front of her, smiling softly at her. His eyes were full of love and pride. He said, Amazing, my wife is amazing. She chuckled, and tears flowed down from her eyes. She reached out and wanted to touch his face, but when she reached out, the face suddenly disappeared. Su Qianxi's lips suddenly turned down. Her eyes were blurred, and she closed them. Li Sicheng, where are you? I miss you so much. It was difficult to give birth to twins naturally, so Su Qianxi had a C-section. A boy and a girl, and the whole family was overjoyed. The boy came out a little earlier than the girl, so he was honored to be the elder brother. However, because of the premature birth, both babies were put in the incubator. Captain Li looked at the rows of little babies inside and could find the name of Su Qianxi at a glance. He was so happy that he couldn't stop smiling. The names of the babies, after thinking about it again and again, Captain Li wrote, Li Jianxian, Li Jianyue. And the nicknames, Su Qianxi directly said the names that Li Sicheng did not know if he was serious or joking, Desu, Ersu. Although many people complained that it sounded bad, it was Li Sicheng who named it, wasn't it? After lying in the hospital for a few days, Su Qianxi quickly moved back to the old house for confinement. Louis Han had upgraded from a male best friend to a male cook. Almost every day, he would come to the old house to cook for Su Qianxi. As for Li Jinnan, he always had a bunch of things that he couldn't understand and would come running into her room to ask all sorts of questions. She answered with a smile, looked at him, and said, Brother-in-law. Li Jinnan bit his pen. He was suddenly yelled at. He looked up in a daze. What's wrong? When I'm done with my confinement, teach me how to fight. You want to learn? Yes, and shooting. Why are you learning this? It's illegal, Li Jinnan said with a straight face. Self-defense. This way, I can protect myself. In the future, I might even be able to protect my child. She smiled and looked at him, bowed her head slightly, and said, Maybe when he comes back, I can proudly say to him, Look, I can live well without you. Li Jinnan stared at her for a long time and nodded his head helplessly. All right, we'll talk about it when you're out of confinement. After Li Jinan left, Nanny Rong came back with the baby to feed. Su Qianxi was too thin and did not have much milk, so she had to mix it with milk powder. Su Qianxi held Ursu in her arms and watched her little hand constantly sucking on Ursu's neck. A smile slowly spread across her lips. Chapter 545. After feeding the baby and putting the baby to sleep, Su Qianxi was very energetic. Picking up her phone, she suddenly found that the chat software that no one had contacted for hundreds of years suddenly sent a message: frowny face L, a boy and a girl. Congratulations. L, the stranger who added her but never chatted with her. A few words were the first words he said to her. She also replied with 2 words, thank you. However, there was no response. The Xiangxian New Town project was completed in the 38th month. Because of the unique design and interior features, it became one of the landmarks of Kingstown. In the 3rd year, it was officially opened, taking the expensive high-end route. In less than a year, the profit was already very considerable. In the past 4 years, Lu Chongqing admired that woman more and more. In other words, everyone in the company admired her. In the Li group, the employees came and went, but she was always there. But half a month ago, her belly was too big to walk, so she directly asked for leave to wait at home for delivery. Kingstown's second hospital, Rong Rui pestered the doctor for a long time before the doctor was willing to let him in. As soon as he entered, he heard Cheng Yu's miserable cry. He immediately ran over and held her hand. As soon as she saw him, she cried out, "Honey! It hurts." Rong Rui was also in pain. Holding her hand, Rong Rui kissed her hand and said, "Don't talk, focus on the birth, and it will be fine after the birth." She gritted her teeth and cried hard. "I will never give birth again. It's so king painful." "Ah. Good girl, don't cry, give birth. After this, we won't give birth again." Rong Rui touched her face, his face full of distress. "I won't give birth again." It turns out that giving birth is really so painful. Although this was not the first time he saw a woman give birth. However, the first time was when he saw Tang Menjing. At that time, he was discouraged and did not feel anything at all. But this time, because it was Cheng Yu, Rong Rui felt heartache. Seeing her pale face, he wished he could replace her and help her. After a long time, Cheng Yu cried until she had no strength and became a lot more obedient. Fortunately, the heavens were extremely kind to him. Natural birth, mother and daughter were safe. When Rong Rui saw the child, he smiled happily. However, he did not pay attention to the child, but held her hand and stayed with her. She didn't know how long she had slept. When she opened her eyes, she saw him. Rong Rui's eyes were covered with a layer of tears. He looked at her and said in a low voice, "Amazing. She gave birth to a little princess." Seeing him like this, she also laughed out loud. "Where is the baby?" "I don't know. The nurse took him away." "What kind of father are you? You don't even know where the child is." "I want to be a husband and then a father." Rong Rui touched her face. "Are you tired?" "Of course." Cheng Yu pouted and suddenly burst into tears. "I'm so tired." Rong Rui panicked when he saw her crying. "Why are you crying? You can't cry after giving birth. It's bad for your eyes." "I just feel sad. You know, when I saw you coming, I felt so happy, Rong Rui." She sobbed. "I still have my husband by my side. I felt the pain at the time, but I was really not afraid at all, but, sob. Rong Rui couldn't help laughing. He was so touched that he wiped her tears and said, "Silly, but, how did Susu get through it?" "When she gave birth to 2 children, it was a cesarean section. She must be very scared, but there was no one around her to accompany her to give birth. She didn't even have someone to cry to. Thinking about it, it's really She cried again and pursed her lips. It's really pitiful. Chapter 546. Rong Roy was silent. Thinking of Su Qianxi, his heart was a bit complicated. For this cousin, Rong Roy always felt guilty for her. Back then, he had helped Tang Menjing do those terrible things, which was why he had ended up like this today. Rong Roy contributed to all of this. Over the years, he had been trying to make up for it, running up and down with Qingyu to help the Li group, and was very busy every day. But every time he saw her standing alone in the office, he felt distressed. She was actually just a woman. Suddenly, Qingyu tugged at him, blinked, and said pitifully, "I'm hungry." Rong Roy smiled. "I'm going to buy you something to eat. Wait for me." "Okay." As soon as Rong Roy went out, the nurse came in with a crying baby. Qingyu was a bit stunned. When she saw the child, she sat up. The baby was red, wrinkled, and small. Qingyu carefully took it, but the little thing cried even harder. "Don't cry." Qingyu held the baby carefully, but the baby's little face was red and wrinkled. Next time, it was Qingyu's turn to cry. Why does she keep crying? Is she hungry? The nurse chuckled. Maybe. Just give her some milk. Qingyu put the little guy on her lap, holding him with one hand and lifting up her clothes with the other. Seeing the nurse staring at her, she blushed and said, "Well, can you close the door?" The nurse snickered, and Qingyu lifted her clothes and stuffed it into the baby's mouth. As soon as the baby was sucked in, she stopped crying and calmed down, but soon began to cry loudly again. "Ah, why is there no milk? Isn't there milk after the baby is born?" Qingyu rubbed and heard the baby crying so hard, and she was very anxious. "It's normal. You can let the baby suck for a while." "Thank you." Qingyu felt a little bitter. Seeing the nurse close the door and went out, she let go and rubbed it. She pressed hard with her hand, and only a little came out. She was happy and stuffed the baby in, but the baby only took a few sips and cried again. She was also anxious to cry. Looking at the phone next to her, she was about to call him back. Just then, someone knocked on the door of the ward, and a slender and tall figure walked in. It was very hot outside. Su Qianxi was wearing a thin pink sleeveless dress. Her long curly hair was combed into a ponytail. She did not have any makeup on her face, but her facial features were still exquisite and eye-catching. Seeing her, Qingyu immediately seemed to see a savior and shouted, "Susu, it's great that you are here." "Ah, I can't milk, and the baby keeps crying. What should I do?" Shuangyu followed behind Su Qianxi. Hearing this, she put down the packed tonic and held a breast pump in the other hand. "It's been sterilized. I knew you wouldn't be able to produce milk. Come, let me hug you." Su Qianxi took the child and gently shook her. "So cute. She will definitely be a beauty in the future." Shuangyu took out the breast pump and handed it to her. She was touched, but soon looked up. "How do you know it is a girl?" You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.